Hello, thanks for tuning in. This call from Mustafa is from the 12th of May. The line, Seth Andrews, Matt Dillahunty in the chair. So Mustafa is calling in to say and claim he doesn't care. He doesn't think it's important whether people's beliefs are actually true or not. He seems to be saying that as long as it's not hurting anybody and as long as it's got some utility, then it doesn't really matter whether what people believe is actually true or not. So Seth Andrews has taken him to task on that. It seems that his mother is a Muslim, and he's asking him, doesn't he understand what the implications of that are? So let's go.
Impact her. What do you think the rules may be for her? Do you know?
Well, she lives in Minnesota with me, so I do not think it's going to impact her at all. In fact, I even I literally shared my experiences with Islam with her, and she always retorts to this. Oh, well, I have my own view, and I hope she's not listening to this. But
okay, so she's
yeah,
not a
so
Muslim. So she's not a Muslim. You don't give a shit about truth, and neither does she. I have zero patience or interest for people who don't care whether something's true and don't think that this shit impacts the world, while we live in a world that is ravaged by wars, misogyny, homophobia, all at the hands of religion, not exclusively at the hand of the religion, but religions amplify all that. I am the beneficiary of a bucket of privilege in many different categories, and yet still I am not as privileged as you are to be able to not give a fuck whether or not these things are true and not give a fuck about how they impact the world or the people. I mean, Jesus Christ, dude. Are you financially set for life where you don't have to work? Do you not care about whether or not someone has a right to choose how to live their life, what to do about a pregnancy? Just
so
the,
okay.
the absolute apathy that you have is one of the most offensive things I've ever heard.
You should know better than to come on to the line and tell Matt Dillahunty that you don't care whether people's beliefs are true or not.
So Matt, I totally respect you, and
It's not mutual.
That's irrelevant. Get to the point.
I hate to make this accusation, but you are starting to put words in my mouth. I do care if
why would you care? Why would you care
power.
why would you care if I put words in your mouth? You don't give a shit if anything's true.
Oh, if you just admitted you're putting words into my mouth.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't just admit that. No, I didn't. I didn't admit that at all. Why are you putting words in my mouth? What I said
No. Yeah, okay.
is, why would you care if I put words in your mouth? I didn't put any words in your mouth. You're the one that said you didn't care if it was true.
No, I see. That's where I put the but.
Rewind.
Which
Yeah, well, it's this common thing where people will say, well, they care if it's true, if it's negatively impacting the person and the world, but if it's not, if it's got some utility, if it's helping them in their life, then it's okay to believe this, even if it's not true or if there's no evidence for it.
I said, as long as they're not an elected official or someone with an actual.
No, it's Seth.
Okay, so now he's qualifying it down and saying that as long as we're not talking about somebody who's in a position of power. But there are private individuals who are not elected officials who have got beliefs and done horrible actions on the basis of those beliefs, and they're not elected officials. So that doesn't really work either, does it?
Someone with an actual.
No, Seth asked you how you knew it. Seth asked you how you knew it wasn't impacting you, and you didn't have an answer to that. You are one of the most apathetic individuals I've ever talked to on these shows, because you have a friend who's willing to convert to Islam, and you're like, as long as it doesn't impact me. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the terrorists who flew into the World Trade Tower, they weren't elected officials, were they? They were acting on the basis of their beliefs, and we don't know whether those beliefs are actually true or not. So if he's saying that he doesn't care whether those beliefs are true, if he'd been in the World Trade Tower that day when those planes hit, he would probably now be dead. So how does one know whether people having unsupported beliefs is actually going to impact him or not?
Okay, I'm not suggesting that you should try to stop her or that should actually be your goal, but to be so cavalier about all this. Well, you ask, you want me to defend why I think there's religious privilege. How on earth can you live in the United States of America and not be aware of religious privilege?
Well, you know what? That I will definitely take. I'll definitely take that. I do live in a pretty secular part of the country, so if that's where my apathy seems to be very present, then that certainly is why.
I think if there was a line that I would put on a T-shirt for you, I just, as you go, ask yourself if it does.
Now, this is the great thing about having the internet. He's made a claim there. He said that he lives in a secular part of the country, and you can see what Matt's doing there. Tip, 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 tip. He's typing away, and he's looking at something. He looks very serious. He wants to check this claim.
Doesn't matter to you. Does it still matter? And I think that's, to be myopic and to say, well, it doesn't affect me, therefore it doesn't affect. It doesn't matter to me, it doesn't impact me, therefore it doesn't matter or impact. Well, I think that, again, it is a position of privilege.
Now, Matt's put his finger up there. He realizes he's got a point. He's got him.
Okay, I asked you. I was not trying to be passive aggressive. I was genuinely asking you to gain information.
Mustafa,
no, I'm not coming after you.
You live in Minnesota, right?
Yes.
According to a 2015 Pew Research Center survey, 74% of Minnesotans identify as Christian, which is slightly higher than the national average of 71%. So given that that's the case, how do you justify your claim that you live in a more secular version of the area of the United States?
Glad you asked. So just because you identify with a religion does not mean that the laws are going to directly result in it. Like, for example, there's a higher proportion of Muslims in Turkey than there is in Saudi Arabia. And keep in mind, Turkey, there's no law saying you gotta identify this religion or you're gonna get your head cut off. Like, people have the free will to just identify what religion they want to be part of, and you can see just from the street, from their media, that they are
secular area. You don't.
Can you repeat that?
You said you lived in a more secular area. The facts show that you don't.
Again, by identity, I'm not saying it's like Texas,
what does
where they're literally.
If you say that you live in a more secular area, what are you pointing to other than identity? Because right now it sounds like you're cherry picking.
Matt, I just explained to you that your religious identity does not always result in what kind of laws you're going to have to go through, or whatever. And that's why you did not say I live in an area with more secular focused laws than other areas. You said you lived in a more secular area. That's not true.
Okay, yeah, they seem to become sidetracked on they're sort of splitting hairs now about what he meant when he said that he lives in a more secular state. Matt disproved him there, or at least on that particular metric. And now he's saying no, he meant that it's a secular place in terms of the laws. I suppose, really, with the exception of abortion laws, that the whole of the USA, from state to state, is fairly secular in terms of the laws which apply. So there wouldn't really be much difference from one state to another. Anyway, let's just see how the call concludes.
The point is this: it doesn't have to matter to you for it to matter, and it does matter if it's true or false, because false ideas, bad ideas, magical thinking, even propaganda, these things can be weaponized. They can misguide people. They can untether them from a real world that they desperately need a foundation on. So when you look at your own situation and that of others, is it true? Should be one of the lead questions I think you should ask. Is that fair?
Oh, yeah, that is certainly fair.
I have a question, and that is, let's just assume that you're right, that you are in a largely...
By the way, that was very well articulated by Seth. Very well articulated.
...secular area of the United States. How is that not just an example of privilege? that you live in a particular part of the United States where you're not as impacted as people in other parts. So therefore you don't care about it because it's not impacting you right now. What if you have to leave Minnesota and move somewhere else?
I don't understand why you keep going back to that. I explained to you, I asked you about the privilege.
You said you don't care if it's true as long as it's not impacting you. And I talked about religious privilege, and your response to religious privilege was to suggest that you don't live in an area where there's any particular where religious privilege is not a big of a deal. And I'm like, okay, even if that were true, and it's not as big a deal where you are, what about the rest of the United States? How is it not just a matter of privilege? If Louisiana is underwater, it doesn't do any good for you to say, I live in Colorado, we're not flooding here.
Matt, I was exemplifying a friend. You're talking about people with power where you live.
Wow.
There's a very stark difference in the people.
Are you incapable or undesirable of actually addressing the point that was made? Exemplifying a friend? You said you lived in a more secular area. How is that exemplifying your friend? You said you only cared if it was true, whether or not it impacted you. How is that exemplifying your friend? How many corners are you going to get backed into before you just acknowledge that you got called out correctly?
About what? Well, we're talking
about your fucking apathy on whether or not something is true and how it's actually impacting people other than you self-focused guy. Go do something for other people for a change.
Okay, hold on.
You don't need to hold on. I don't need to hold on. I'm done with you, Mustafa. I'm done with you.
You know nothing about me. Fuck you, Matt.
I know lots of things about you because you've been proud enough to talk about them on the air.
Okay, there we are. So obviously if an atheist calls in and is apathetic to the truth, doesn't care whether people's beliefs are true or not, it's not going to go well between Matt and the caller, and it ended there with Mustafa sort of doubling down on his position, claiming Matt to put words into his mouth. But what he's saying effectively is like saying, oh, well, disease is only a problem in places where it happens. Like, for example, it's not a problem for me that children are dying of yellow fever in Africa because I'm fine sitting here. I don't think it's too unfair an analogy to compare believing things which have not got the evidence to support them with having a disease. If you hold a belief for which you've got no rational, good empirical reasons for believing, then it's like a kind of disease of the mind. And as a general principle, we like not to have disease, physical disease. And as a general principle, we should not want to have a disease of the mind, not mental illness, but incorrect thinking, which leads to false beliefs, which could lead to bad outcomes wherever they happen to be, even if they don't impact on you as a human being. You should not want these false beliefs to impact on anyone. Okay, thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.